You are listening to Fantha tracks.
He's waiting.
Classic Star Wars and the collectibles they gave us. From vintage Star Wars to the modern era of the saga. This is Collecting Tracks. Here are your hosts, Richard Hutchinson and Andy Preston.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Collecting Tracks. I'm Richard Hutchinson.
And I'm Andy Preston.
And we're delighted to bring you a special All for Star Wars podcast day. Now Andy, when Mark asked us to be part of this, which I'm absolutely delighted that we are, we had to rack our brains and have a think of what we can cover for about a 15-20 minute topic. And obviously in vintage, you couldn't even talk about a plain black badge for less than 15-20 minutes, could you? Not very easily.
No, absolutely.
So what I've decided to look at is a document that was posted online by Jimmy Mack, not the Rebel Force Radio Jimmy Mack. This is Jimmy Mack from Canada, who is a vintage Star Wars collector. In the post that he made, he wrote, between September the 23rd and October the 1st of 1982, Kenner surveyed 400 boys in Minneapolis, Philadelphia and St. Louis and San Francisco, and concluded in an internal meeting that not only were these the most 35 popular action figures, but no further articulation was needed for 1984, as it wouldn't lead to increased sales. I want to take the second point first there, Andy. So what does that mean? No further articulation was needed.
Yeah, well, the vintage figure line had pretty much uniquely 5 points of articulation, didn't it? Some had fewer. The likes of, I don't know, R2-D2 and so on. Some had more. FX7 had quite a few arms that popped out and swiveled and did things. But majority, the humanoid characters, 5 points of articulation. So that was the head and the four limbs. Some of the other toy lines at the time, and I'm thinking the A-Team and some of the others, had more articulation. So they had joints in the elbows, joints in the knees. You could pose them a little bit more realistically, perhaps. But I know that came at a trade-off, didn't it, back in those days when the technology perhaps wasn't as good as what it is today. You had perhaps metal pins through some of those joints to make them a little bit more stronger, a little bit more kid-proof. And personally, I never liked the look of that. I always liked the Star Wars, and they went the same way with the Action Force G.I. Joe, just those 5 points of articulation. And I think I would rather have had that than pins through the arms and pins through the legs, and not looking as good as what the Star Wars figures did.
Well, the only one time I actually thought it didn't quite work was on the Biker Scout, because all of the other ships, monsters, they sort of designed them so it didn't even matter if the knees bent. But I thought the Biker Scout would have been the only character I would have had a knee pin in.
Yeah, that would have helped, wouldn't it? I mean, they come up with some ingenious solutions otherwise. I'm thinking of the Dewback, where the stormtrooper couldn't ride the Dewback, couldn't get his legs astride, so they came up with the idea of a trapdoor, and you'd actually put the figure down inside the body, which was ingenious, and of course repeated that with the Tauntaun later on. But yeah, Biker Scout, it would have been good to have flexible knees so that he could ride the bike properly. I seem to recall there was an advert for action figures in a Boots the Chemist catalogue in the UK, which showed a Biker Scout that must have been modified by somebody in the advertising department, and he actually did have bent knees, sat on his speeder bike. And there's been debate ever since about how that came about. But yeah, you're right. That would have been a good example. But no, we never got it, did we, in the Star Wars line?
However, I do have to agree with you, Andy. I do not think that having 7-9 points of articulation would have led to any increased sales, because at the end of the day, the figures were flying off the shelves. I can understand some kind of survey to this scale being done perhaps in 83, 84, looking for sales in 85 and 86, but it was rampant.
Yeah, because this survey was done, I think you said 1982, didn't you? So
yes,
it was
September
with the Empire Strikes Back figures out, and I guess they were looking ahead to Return of the Jedi line, and particularly I think it was the 1984 line that they were surveying for, weren't they? Trying to decide what figures kids might like to see, and as you say, whether they should go for more articulation.
Now, the other document that he posted as part of this was the top 35 figures, which I think is absolutely fascinating, interesting read. So we'll start off with the bottom 5, Andy, first of all. So what this list is the top 35 most popular action figures.
And this is from all different lines, isn't it?
All different lines, not just
I
Star
imagine
Wars.
I imagine what they'd done is had a bunch of action figures out on a table, got kids to come round and just see which ones they wanted to play with, which ones they thought were the best figures, which ones they might have wanted to take home, and they've ranked them by popularity. So 1 down to 35. So you're asking which ones came at the bottom of the list. Well, very bottom, you'll be extremely disappointed to hear, I know, was R5D4.
Well, no, I'm not really, because honestly, like the top 35, so you take out all of the non-Star Wars items, and there's a lot in there that's not Star Wars. You know, that it really shows how much of a popular figure it is, and it's baffling, because at the end of the day, if you want a droid, purists want R2D2. I don't care what action figure you collect, you know, if you want a droid, R2D2 is the one that you have to have. That's the most screen time. R5D4 has a very, very limited screen time, does very little in the movie, but is still on this list, so I think it's quite an impressive feat.
Well, you have a point. And of course, we're talking about 35 figures, not all of them Star Wars. And at that stage, end of the Empire Strikes Back, there were no less than 45 action figures. Actually, 47 if you count the 2 droids in their 2 different variations. Mm-hmm. So, well done, R5.
Hello there, you beautiful people. This is Steve Evans, Senior Design Director for Star Wars at Hasbro. And you are listening to, you guessed it, Fantha Tracks.
Next one up from that, Bespin Han Solo. I absolutely can't see that one being there. It's not the best Han Solo figure, but, you know, it's Empire Strikes Back, it's Han Solo. For me, it's an absolute no-brainer as well.
Absolutely. And then we got Hammerhead. Aliens, always popular. I think they flew off the shelves. Every kid wanted the Cantina aliens, didn't they? And Hammerhead is up there. I'm just scanning through. I think he is the only one, actually, of those 4 who's made the list. So well done, Hammerhead.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that about the Cantina aliens, whether he was the favourite of the Cantina aliens or the least favourite. But yeah, he must be the favourite because he's right on top there. So that is good.
Yeah. Well, Greedo didn't make the list, did he? One would have thought Greedo, because he's the one that had the shootout with Han Solo. Mm-hmm. But no, Greedo didn't make the list. Does beg the question whether they only had 35 figures on the table.
Now, the next 2 I know very, very little about, so I don't know if you know much about number 32, which is Cletus.
Yeah, Cletus from the Dukes of Hazzard. He was one of the inept cops, wasn't he?
Yes, the doofus one.
Working for Boss Hogg, and they used to chase the Duke boys all around Hazzard County. So, yeah, good old Cletus, number 32. And then I don't know very much at all about this one other than the name. It's an infantry trooper from G.I. Joe. But whether that's a good guy, a bad guy, whether it's designed to go in a snow environment, a desert environment, goodness knows. That's all we got to go on, Rich. Infantry trooper.
However, from your description there, if you've got a cop, most kids want an action figure of a cop to play with all of the toys that they've got, regardless of whether it's Dukes of Hazzard. It could be anything. It could be Action Man or whatever. And anything that's infantry trooper, again, that seems to be, you could probably stick an infantry trooper in the Star Wars universe and it wouldn't make much of a difference. Not many people will be able to tell. So I can understand those 2 being there.
You could. I had a few Action Force figures mixed in with my vintage Star Wars back in the day. So, why not? Next on the list, we come back to a Star Wars figure. And quite surprised this one's not higher, actually. The Hoth Stormtrooper. We just said this was a survey done in the era of Empire Strikes Back. The Snowtrooper's really cool. What kid would not want a Hoth Stormtrooper to play with? So surprised to see that in at equal 25.
Do you think the skirt made a problem with it?
No, I don't think so. I don't think. I mean, we're going to get very sexist here, aren't we?
Yeah.
I don't think it was a girly skirt. I mean, in those days, you know, we all know the Leia figures didn't sell so well, and Leia Bubble Bath didn't sell so well. So, you know, these were toys aimed primarily at boys. And I don't think a quote girly figure would have sold perhaps as well, but no, I think it was just part of the costume. I think the snowtroopers were cool. You know, they were the bad guys. They had an action role, and no, I don't think that really put people off. Certainly never on my mind. The next one, also equal 25, and I am going to do this, Rich. This is Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane. He was another Dukes of Hazzard character. So obviously the sheriff under Boss Hogg, not quite so inept as Cletus and his mates, but again, a good figure of fun. And I seem to remember every other episode he'd end up with his cop car in a pond or in a swamp or something, and he'd go, "Kee, kee, kee, kee."
I do actually remember him now. For some reason, was he always chewing tobacco or something like that? Is he that kind of policeman?
He was, that's right. That's right. But yeah, corrupt as they come.
Reminding me of Scooby-Doo and those pesky kids. Next one. Again, this one I was a little bit surprised as well, with X-Wing Luke Skywalker. Now, I'm mixed on this one because, without a doubt, there has to be an X-Wing figure. There has to be. But were people really bothered it was Luke? Would they have been as bothered if it was Wedge?
No, I had an army. Well, I say army. I had 3 or 4 X-Wing pilots, and as far as I was concerned, they were all just sort of general X-Wing pilots. I'd have a couple in the Snowspeeder and one in the X-Wing. So, no, I don't think so. I think they were army builders, and like you say, surprised that one is so far down, because I do love that X-Wing Luke figure. There's another Luke Skywalker alongside him in at equal 25, and that is the Hoth Luke Skywalker. Again, Empire Strikes Back figure. Fantastic sculpt, something a little bit different. Always thought that figure should have come with a lightsaber. I thought that would have elevated it a little bit. Blue lightsaber packed in with that one. But nope, there he is, fairly low down on the list. And above him, we have another Dukes of Hazzard figure. Dukes of Hazzard must have been all the rage back in the heady days of 1982. This is Cooter. Now, he was the mechanic, I think, wasn't he? He was the guy who'd fix up the General Lee every time it got bent, having done one of those big jumps.
No idea. I can't remember any kind of mechanic, but obviously this points to the fact that the Dukes of Hazzard is going to be a weekly show, whereas Star Wars was, you saw it once and you weren't expected to see it again. So the TV shows are coming out really popular on this. You kind of expect that. As the next one, Commando for G.I. Joe. Now, even the word Commando is quite cool, so I think, again, don't know the figure that well, but I can imagine that one being absolutely popular just for the name. It strikes that very ruggish, boyish thing in the army building word for me.
Yeah, Special Forces, the elite. Yeah, that's the figure that a kid's going to go for, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But not as cool, apparently, as the next figure in the list, which is the Power Droid from Star Wars, the Gonk. The little blue box on legs. I think it's a very cool figure now, but I wasn't that keen on it as a kid. Didn't really do very much, didn't have an action role. It was one of those background characters. So, yeah, surprised to see that one in there, really, and especially above some of those figures that we've already talked about. Yeah,
absolutely, me too. I mean, the only thing I really liked about Power Droid was the fact it did do a clicky noise. Maybe that was enough, the click.
Maybe it was. Above him, we have another G.I. Joe figure, Machine Gunner, and that's all we're told about that one. Again, machine guns are cool, aren't they? Big gun, that's what everybody wants. So, yeah, not a surprise to see that one in there. And above him, we have another Han Solo figure. This is the original Han Solo. Always liked that figure. Surprised that one not higher, really?
I agree. I think that one... Actually, you know what? There's probably a reason why it isn't higher up, and we'll come to that much later on. I don't actually recall owning an original 12 Han. I do remember having Han Hoth, but I don't think I ever had one of the first 12s. But definitely one of the cool figures, without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. But Han Hoth not on this list at all.
No.
Empire Strikes Back figure, very cool figure. Yeah, surprising. Communications officer from G.I. Joe next. Communications officer, better figure than a machine gunner and a commando? Well, kids in 1982 must have thought so.
Probably had some kind of nice headset attached to it for some... Yeah, I can see that without a doubt.
Yeah.
And then the next two, both, you'd expect them to be pretty high up on the list. C-3PO.
And Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, these days Boba Fett would probably be number one, wouldn't he?
Oh, absolutely. But
in lists of favourite vintage figures, but 19th equal alongside C-3PO and a communications officer and a power droid, apparently.
But that really points to the success of Fett, because he was pretty much a dud in the movie. And as kids, we just had to go on with imagination. But then when you get this cool action figure with a rocket, backpack that everybody dreamed of it firing, awesome figure. And we're now reporting in the top 20 now, haven't we?
We have, yes. So coming in at number 18, another Dukes of Hazzard figure. This is Uncle Jesse, the old boy, the leader of the Duke clan. Didn't really do very much in the TV series, if I remember rightly. I think he bailed him out of trouble a few times, but there he is in at number 18, above Kuda, above a couple of the cops. But he's not as cool as either of the next two, which are the Star Wars Stormtrooper, that must be the original Stormtrooper, and the Cairo Swordsman from Raiders. First Raiders figure on the list. What do you make of those two, Rich?
Well, the Stormtrooper, it's a brilliant sculpt, it really is, and obviously that's not a 5-point of articulation because its head didn't move, but that was a wonderful, wonderful sculpt. The Cairo Swordsman, I am a little bit surprised by. Again, I wasn't an Indy fan. I still not to this day. I think the third Indy movie is the best because I appreciate it as a movie from an adult point of view. Whereas the others, even as a kid, I didn't like them. So the Cairo Swordsman, I can see the need for being somebody for Indy to foil off against. But as an action figure, it was just meh. Wasn't my thing.
Yeah, well, we never really got the Kenner Raiders line over here, did we?
No.
It must have been in specialist import shops, but it was never in the stores the same way Star Wars was. So, yeah, a bit surprising from a British point of view, but Kenner really went all out with it in the States. It was really big over there. A lot of collectors now still like that line. So, yeah, perhaps from an American perspective, not quite so surprising to see that at 16 alongside the Stormtrooper.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Couple of G.I. Joe figures next, Rich.
Yes, so the Mortar Soldier. I mean, yet again, you think of, I don't know the G.I. Joe line, but perhaps a figure with some kind of tube that would, fire rockets off, mortars off into the air. I can see that being an absolute cool figure. And Ranger, again, it's another one of those characters that would fit in Star Wars, it would fit in G.I. Joe, it would fit the Action Man. So I can see these generic kind of characters being used and being really popular. So great idea.
Number 12. Again, a Ranger, I assume that's the Airborne Rangers, that's the Elite Special Forces again.
Yes.
Really cool figure to have.
Now, number 12 and 13, both joint, are both Star Wars figures, Andy, but there's now starting to get a big jump in the rankings. So whereas before we're moving up by 0.1 of 1,000, we're now starting to see some significant gains in the number of votes for these characters. So we're hitting some really dizzying heights now with number 12 and 13.
Yes, these figures are expressed in percentage terms, aren't they? So going right back down to the bottom of the list, number 32, where you've got Cletus and Hammerhead and Bespin Han Solo R5D4, 1.3% voted for each of those figures. But in at number 12, 2.2%. So getting on for twice as many votes as for those figures in last place. We have the AT-AT driver, and we have Bespin Luke Skywalker. Don't think anybody can deny that both of those are amongst the two coolest figures in the line. Great sculpts, exciting figures, nice paint jobs, got some cool weapons. So, not surprised to see them at all doing well in the list.
Completely agree. And then number 11, Zuckuss, by itself on 2.3%. So this is a character on its own, quite a bit higher than some of the rest of them, which... a bit of a surprise to me. Is it a cool sculpt? Yeah, absolutely. It looks robotic, it looks alien, it comes with cool accessories. But there were other figures that could have perhaps been more popular, like IG-88, for example. I mean, is that on the list?
That is not on the list, Rich.
So would you say IG-88's better than Zuckuss? Because I certainly would.
I certainly would, yeah. Yeah, bounty hunter droid, 2 weapons, really looks badass. So, yeah, I am very surprised that's not higher. Perhaps gives a little bit more weight to the theory that they only had 35 figures to put out, and kids have ranked those 35. Zuckuss, we should clarify just for those people who are not vintage fans, in the vintage line, Zuckuss was the grey droid with the insectoid eyes, wasn't he?
Yep.
And 4LOM was the guy with the leather coat and the breathing apparatus. And those names, of course, were mistakenly switched by Kenner, and they've been switched back for more recent releases. But yeah, Zuckuss there, number 11, was the grey droid figure. Just above him, we have another Star Wars entry, don't we?
Yes, and look at the percentage point jump. So we went from 2.3, and all the other movements have been quite small. We've jumped to 2.6, so we went up 0.3 on this one, Andy, with Yoda.
Yes, Yoda. Now, you don't get much for your money with Yoda, do you, in terms of plastic, but he comes with all those accessories. He's got his coat, he's got his belt, he's got his snake, his stick, and as far as Empire is concerned, he is one of the coolest characters, isn't he? He's the Jedi Master, he's the wise old sage, the one that trains Luke. Everybody's got to have Yoda. And he's cute as well, that must be a factor. Not many cute figures in the Star Wars line until you get arguably up to the Ewoks, who aren't on this list because they weren't around in 82. So, yeah, maybe the cute factor has bumped Yoda up a little bit.
Well, next on the list is absolutely no surprise that this is in the top 10. The original Luke Skywalker. But again, quite a jump from Yoda on 2.9, so that this figure's twice as popular as some of the ones that's further down. The original Luke Skywalker, I have to agree, absolutely brilliant. Everybody has fond memories of the lightsaber slotting inside and out of the arm until you inevitably broke it, and then you had to replace it with a matchstick or something. But yeah, absolutely wonderful figure. Thoroughly deserves its spot.
Yeah, very much so. And he's there on position 8 alongside the laser rifle trooper from G.I. Joe. Again, Rich, apologies to our listening audience. Not familiar with the G.I. Joe range. I don't know what this figure looks like or what he does, but a laser rifle trooper, again, could that have fit nicely into a Star Wars collection? Is that perhaps why he's up there? A bit sort of sci-fi, a bit more exciting than an everyday soldier, maybe?
Possibly. And then we're coming to a nice little one of Star Wars figures. Now, bearing in mind how popular Luke Skywalker was, and you'd expect that, is it a bit of a surprise that number 7 is the TIE Fighter pilot, again with a percentage jump of 0.2? TIE Fighter pilot? Yeah, absolutely cool, wonderful figure. But is it something our children would rank above Luke?
Perhaps they would, Rich. I mean, they obviously did in this survey, didn't they? TIE Fighter pilot was a new figure at that stage. So it was one of the last to be released. It was in the last, was it 7 or 8 or 9 figures that came out in the Empire line? So kids doing this survey sat around the table looking at these figures. They might not have seen a TIE Fighter pilot before. Might have thought, wow, that's new, that's cool. So that might have given it a little bit of a boost. But more so than that, it is just a really cool figure, isn't it? The sculpt, the colouring, the fact that he's all in black. What's not to like there?
Well, why so much higher than the AT-AT driver?
Good question. Kid appeal, I suppose. Yeah. Black, mysterious, you got that Vader vibe about him, always popular. So, yeah, could just be the colour scheme.
Hi, this is John Morton from The Empire Strikes Back, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Number 6 is not a black figure. We do return to black figures fairly quickly, don't we? But number 6 is R2-D2. Doesn't distinguish between the original one or the Sensoscope version, but R2-D2 in at number 6. Who doesn't love R2-D2? I think you said before, didn't you? If you're going to have a droid from Star Wars, you want R2. He's like a Swiss Army knife. He's like your favourite dog, saves the day. Bless him. Who can't manage without an R2 action figure?
Absolutely. And now we're getting into the dizzying height of the top 5. So in the top 5, it's still quite surprising how many of these figures are Star Wars figures as opposed to Empire figures. But number 5, Darth Vader.
Darth Vader, indeed. Yeah, well, he's got to be up there, hasn't he? We've just talked about Men in Black. Vader, the big villain of the piece. the antagonist, the one that fights Luke and fights Ben. You've got to have Vader in your Star Wars collection. Really cool character, really cool figure. He's got that slidey lightsaber thing going on again. So, yeah, not at all surprised to see Darth Vader up there and taking 3.4% of the vote. Next, we have another tall figure from Star Wars, one of the only ones to match Vader for height, and another very cool action figure. It is Chewbacca. In at number 4, 3.5% of the vote. And yeah, again, Wookiee, big, strong, pull people's arms out of their sockets. An obvious choice, I think.
Not one of my favourites, I'm going to be honest with you. I would still have taken an IG-88, just something like that up there, but the numbers we're talking about now, 3.5%, I mean, you can't argue against the popularity there, but when you look at the list now, right, I know we've got a top 3 to cover, but there's no Star Wars in top 3. If you chop them top 3 out, would you say that Chewbacca was the most popular figure?
Not to me now, no, but to kids in the day, quite possibly.
No.
He's, very popular character in the movies. Han Solo's sidekick. He's got a bit of that family dog about him again. Again, a little bit of the cute factor, cute and fierce at the same time. So, yeah, I can see Chewie being very popular with kids.
Right, breaking the top 3 then, Andy. Where does number 3... Well, what is number 3? Because, again, my memory of the Dukes of Hazzard is so sketchy.
Yeah, number 3 is Luke Duke. Luke Duke, played by Tom Wopat. He was the dark-haired one of the Duke boys. He tended to be not quite as adventurous, not quite as thrill-seeking as Bo. I think Luke was the more sensible one of the partnership, wasn't he? He had to rein his cousin in at times. So Luke Duke, number 3 on 3.7% of the vote. No surprise then to see at number 2 with 3.9% of the vote, his cousin Bo Duke. Bo, the blonde one, John Schneider, the cool one, the one who always got the girls, the one that tended to drive the General Lee. So, I'm not surprised to see him up there above his cousin. Whether we in the UK would have expected to see the Duke boys up there right near the top of the list, I don't know. But again, the show was massive in the States. And 1982, it must have been just about at its peak. So, perhaps not surprising.
And then we hit the top of the pile. So I kind of hinted on before as to why the Han Solo figure that we talked about before wasn't on the list anywhere. To be fair, there's already, the original Han's on there. How many Hans have we got? Bespin Han,
Bespin Han and original Han,
yeah. So I kind of, makes sense why Han Hoth is in there as well. But right at the top of the list, and this is like not even close, this is almost 2 percentage points higher, is the Indiana Jones action figure, which obviously for many people is also Han Solo.
Yeah, absolutely. Raiders came out in 1981. So it was a year after Empire. It was perhaps a little bit more fresh in the memory. And Indy, come on, what a character. Played by Han Solo, as a lot of people would have seen it. Really cool character, one that every kid wanted to be. And I'm not at all surprised with an American survey of kids. Again, Kenner promoted the hell out of the Indiana Jones line. And there he is. Top of the pile, 5.7%, and you compare that with the next on the list, which was Bo Duke at 3.9%. So, as you say, nearly 2 full percentage points higher. An outstanding, clear winner.
Yeah, absolutely. But what is the clear winner was the fact that this actually got posted, and we could go back and have that brief snapshot to a little tiny sample of 400 children that Kenner did back in 1982 to pick up their views. I think that's what the true winner is.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, as a snapshot of what kids were into at the time, what would have sold best. That's really interesting. There's a good breakdown of toys on there. There's 4 or 5 different lines. of the 35 figures, 20 of them were Star Wars figures, which tells you a lot about the popularity of the saga then. But they didn't come out on top. It was Raiders and the Dukes of Hazzard. So there you go. Perhaps Star Wars was on the wane. It was a couple of years since Empire had come out. Jedi was still on the far horizon, so perhaps other things had taken the place of Star Wars in the public's affection. But we all know Return of the Jedi hit summer of 1983, and, well, the amount of action figures that were released in support of Jedi and how popular they were, that is another story.
Absolutely. Well, Andy, I hope our listeners enjoyed that and were waiting with bated breath as to what was moving up the list with our terrible knowledge of G.I. Joe, but expert knowledge on Star Wars, and you pulled it out of the bag for the Dukes of Hazzard there.
Yeah, enjoyed that, Rich. Thank you. Yeah, thank you to all our listeners. Take care, everybody.
Yep, and enjoy all the rest of the shows on Star Wars Podcast Day.
So thanks for listening to Collecting Tracks. If you want to be part of the action, stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com or check out the free Fantha Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fantha Tracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Fantha Tracks intro, Andy Lythe for our Collecting Tracks open music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember to tune in to Good Morning Tatooine, live Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. Check out Fantha Tracks Radio Friday evenings at 7 p.m. UK time for new episodes of The Fantha from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks and Cannon Fodder, and every Tuesday at 7 p.m. UK time for your weekly episode of Making Tracks.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Desert Planet Discs.